Yeah, you see, it's an interesting point there, because if you look at decriminalization, you're trying to save young lives and not have them facing the stigma all of their lives if they want to go on. For example, I read of a story recently where someone used marijuana and could not get into the armed forces after being clean for a long time. That's a problem. But on the other hand, I think what the superintendent says is that there's a lot of danger inherent in the concept that people who might use the medical excuse, people who might say, well, I just want to use it recreationally for whatever, and stay in my house. That may not happen.
Well, New Jersey is not like California or Colorado or Montana where you can get marijuana for anxiety. You have to have a specific ailment, has to be prescribed by the treating physician for that ailment, and the doctors have to be registered with the state of New Jersey. They have to go on a medical registry, and the patients have to go on a registry. So there's a lot of checks in the system for New Jersey, and that's why it's strict and it's geared for the people that actually can benefit from the use of medicinal marijuana.
Don't you have a bit of a conflict here because you're a prosecutor? And so as a prosecutor, you have to follow the law and do what the law tells you to do.
Well, yes, and as a prosecutor, I prosecute people with possession of marijuana, and you'll talk to a lot of people in police that would rather utilize their efforts for more dangerous crimes than the occasional joint in the park, or prosecuting somebody with one joint. In New Jersey, we have to actually ship that joint to the state police for analysis, has to then come back. The lab technician has to testify that it is indeed marijuana. The officer that delivered that sample to the state police has to testify, and it's really costly for taxpayers to prosecute somebody for one joint.
Tina, a question for you. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard from doctors that people who become addicted start with one drug and move to another. Is that accurate? Or they might start with...
Are you referring to the term marijuana as a gateway drug?
Yes.
There is no research out there that can prove or that indicates that that is true. That's something that was started years ago. We can make a correlation between, babies drinking milk and becoming addicted to marijuana. So no, there's no good research out there that says that.
Can I
I'd like to say
something on this? I'm sorry to interrupt. It's true that if you smoke marijuana, it does not necessarily mean it's going to lead to more serious drugs. However, I would state this, that most people that use harder drugs, whether it's crack, heroin, or whatever the case may be, I guarantee you every single one of them started with using marijuana. I'm not saying all marijuana users graduate to the higher drugs, but everybody that uses a more serious drug smoked marijuana at one time or another in their life.
You think that's accurate?
That could be accurate. Yes.
But I mean, as a person involved in a treatment center that has national reputation here, I'm a little surprised you perhaps are a little not as concerned about marijuana. I'm just asking you as a reporter.
Right. Well, most people who start using start with marijuana and/or alcohol. They are drugs that people use. Does that mean that people who use marijuana will go on to use harder drugs? No. But is it a drug that people use first, teenagers, things like that? Yes, it is.
And I don't disagree with the chief either. And as a prosecutor, you could probably make that correlation. But the real criminal activity is when they use the heroin or the larger or the more dangerous drugs. There's very few people that will rob a bank or do criminal activity after smoking a joint.
We'll be back with more on marijuana, the controversy, the serious nature of the responsibilities of lawmakers, treatment centers, and the police departments. And you can't chime in right now, but we'd love to hear from you at Twitter. Let us know how you feel. We'll be right back. Back in Voice of Reason with the marijuana debate. Interesting graph here that our producer Kevin Donahue found. The people in favor of marijuana in 1969, 12% in America, 12% in favor of marijuana legalization of some sort. In 2011, 56%. Still a bit over 50%, but still a remarkable difference. And Tina, when you look at acceptance in society, do you believe, as a person who's involved with treatment, that people are accepting this more? Are they accepting it less as a stigma of a hippie generation from the 1960s and a beat generation from the 1950s and an acid generation of the late 1960s and early 70s. Do you think they're accepting it now as mind candy?
I don't think it's being accepted as mind candy, because by the time we see somebody, they've already become addicted. In order to be entered in treatment, they have to meet criteria for dependence. So when we see somebody, the recreational part of that, it's no longer fun. You know, we see the progression of the disease through the history and physical, but an example was a young man came in, he was a college student, he met criteria for inpatient treatment, which means he had a lot of impairment. He would sit all day and smoke cannabis and play video games. He was financially, there was a lot of impairment, there was a lot of consequences, negative consequences that were going on, and he needed treatment. So by the time we see somebody, they don't refer to it as candy. Their life has pretty much fallen apart and they're asking for help to get it back together.
Larry, I would like to know the age category of that survey and in what context that question was asked. Was it just blatantly asked, are you in favor of legalizing marijuana, or were there certain stipulations?
I don't know if we have that. I really don't know if we have that.
Because I think that could be a skewed survey, in my opinion, because it depends on who you ask and under what context it's asked. I don't think anybody would argue that a person who's terminal or in severe pain should have access to something that's going to relieve the pain. But, you know, we talked about doctors earlier and about the controls on doctors. You know, like police officers, a certain percentage of police officers are corrupt, period. You have a certain percentage of doctors that prescribe Percocet, Oxycontin, where people don't need it. And then you always hear about people, well, you know, I got addicted to prescription pain pills. They always use the word prescription as an adjective. What's to stop a doctor from abusing prescriptions for medical marijuana? And that's my concern.
Well, I think there will be abuse, but again, in New Jersey, we have a fail-safe where we require the doctors to register. There also, prescriptions are monitored. We also have the patient registry. So we've tried to do everything to avoid that. And back to the opinion polls, it did pass in Washington and Colorado, so that's indicative of that there is public support out there. I don't support legalization, but I don't think that we necessarily need to make felons or criminals out of a person who's recreationally using marijuana.
How do you feel about it as a police officer? If you get a young person who's 17 or 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 and they get caught with it once, is that enough to destroy their lives?
No, I agree with the prosecutor. It should not destroy their lives, but there are certain programs you put person into. If it's a first offender, if it's a small amount of marijuana, they get put into a program which includes treatment and counseling, and then they get the record expunged. But there has to be some kind of accountability for their actions.
What about young people? Do you see younger people in the high school arena, and I'm not suggesting about your particular high school, but in the region, using this a lot now?
Absolutely. In fact, I have a drug task force that works for me, and they work with the county, and I personally see an increase in the use of marijuana amongst young people, and that's very alarming to me.